I taught in a very rural area. I don't know if very and rural, I don't know if that goes, but in a rural area, very small school district. There was one building for K-6 and another building for 7-12. So I had pretty heterogeneous group of kids, 7th through 12th grade. And I had been teaching there for a number of years and really developed a good relationship with my students. The teacher who was there before me was very nurturing and did a lot of hand-holding, and there was a big adjustment when she left and I came in because they really wanted me to hold their hand, and yet they were, you know, high school students at this point, and I was very demanding in terms of them learning how to be more and more independent. So I'm a fairly nurturing person, but I also really encourage independence, particularly of my students with special needs. So it was a little bit of a rough adjustment period, but we got through that. Things are clipping along really, really well. My students are doing great. And a lot of these students had been bullied by other students, had been, you know, it's a very small community, so they are really stigmatized, really stick out in terms of who they are and what their histories have been and those kinds of things. So meanwhile, so I'm at the only special education classroom really, and then there's a resource room. And the resource room serves kids mainly with very mild sorts of learning disabilities. And the teacher was really great. She taught Kansas learning strategies. How many of you know the Kansas learning strategies? Right, so she taught those, and the kids would, you know, learn how to do all the great study skills and that kind of thing that the Kansas Learning Strategies taught. Well, she had a student in there whose name was Jack. He had very, very significant behavior problems. And he was one who had a long, long and painful history of really giving my students a hard time, bullying them, doing some really terrible things. And so toward the end of a school year, I was at a child study team meeting, and they were in the process of deciding. Now, this was before the revisions to IDEA and that kind of thing. So if it sounds peculiar to you, it's because it was before some of the revisions in the legislation. But they were deciding that they really couldn't handle him in this district anymore, and they needed to not only identify him as having a behavior disorder, but send him to a more restrictive placement that could handle his behavior problems. And I said, wait a minute. You haven't come to me first. Like, I can deal with this. Like, you know, some of you who know me are like, oh yeah, big surprise, right? So I'm like, send him our way. Like, we'll do this. So they're like, okay. So it's going to save them money, right? They don't have to send him on a district. So they're perfectly happy to see what the girl can do. So they're all male administrators in this very small district. They were great. So I returned to my class, and as I'm walking down the hall, I'm thinking, oh wow, like I'm not the only one involved in this decision, and like there are going to be some implications for my students. So I figure, well, I guess I better tell them. So it's May, it's about toward the end of the school year, April or May, and so I went in, and after lunch we sort of had a little sort of after lunch meeting, and I said, so I have some news for you. You all know these two are graduating. We'll be getting some more students in from 6th grade up, and we'll also be having Jack join us from the other classroom. Students freaked out. I'm telling you, meltdowns, tears, upset, like just they were, how can you do this to us? Miss McComas, we can't do that, don't you know? And I heard story after story after story after, about how horrible Jack was and blah, blah, blah. They could not be in the same classroom as Jack. So I let them get all that out, and the next day get more out, fielded some phone calls from parents, and I just said, look, this is the situation. Jack is joining our class. I didn't tell him I said, bring Jack on. I just said, like, Jack is joining our class. So for the rest of that school year, we worked together as a community. We did some problem solving, we did some pre-planning and those kinds of things. And then the following year, Jack joined our class. Lots of issues. He had a parole officer because he had weapons violations, and so he frequently saw his parole officer, and he would be angry when he came back from seeing his parole officer. So there were a lot of issues that we had to deal with, and it was a rough start to the school year. But as time went on, we worked really intentionally on building community and working together. And responding to each other's behavior in ways that were not going to make it worse, and separating ourselves from what behaviors were going on in the classroom. And I still, there were times when things were happening where I sent the rest of the students to the media center and dealt with Jack. But things started to go better and better and better. And at the same time we were building community and doing those kinds of things, we were working on the IEP goals, academic as well as behavioral. And Jack had some of his IEP goals had to do with things like accepting no for an answer, following the responding appropriately to adult requests or adult direction, those kinds of things, instead of being disruptive and disrespectful and those kinds of things, which happen really often. So, and he's, doing well on his IEP goals, his social skills are coming along, he's doing great with me, he's responding, I'll say, Jack, do this, and he would do it. I'd say, Jack, I understand that you were tardy to such and such a class, so, that's your fourth tardy. Your fifth tardy means a detention, so, watch that. And he wouldn't get all, have an outburst and that kind of thing. So I was really pleased with the way things were going. The school administration was surprised, but okay, they were pretty happy, saving money, it's okay. Waiting for the other shoe to drop. I'm still a master's student, but I'm going to one of my first Association for Behavior Analysis conferences, and I'm so excited, and it's Memorial Day weekend, and it's a long weekend, and the kids are excited. So conference started on Friday. I think I left on Wednesday night to be there an extra day on Thursday for some workshops or something. And then it goes from Friday through Tuesday, so I returned on Wednesday. So I'm gone, no cell phones or anything this. Was a long time ago, remember the wrinkles. And so Wednesday, and I'm so excited to see my class. There's only 2 weeks of school left. It's almost June. Everything is really exciting for me anyway, and most of my students. And so I come in and, everybody's glad to see me. They've got 1,000 things to tell me, but Jack is missing. I said, where's Jack? So they were uncharacteristically quiet. So come to find out, there was an incident between Jack and the substitute, and he got sent to the principal's office, and then the way that he interacted with the principal ended up in the principal threatening to, if he didn't get his act together, he wasn't going to be able to walk in graduation. Now this is a boy who, a young adult really, he was 18, had earned, I don't know how many, he had made up 10 credits or something, plus the credits he had earned that year. He had worked so hard to be able to graduate, right? But he had had this interaction with the substitute that was not good at all. He dropped out, okay? So, what the hell, right? Sorry. So I'm not gonna beat myself up about it anymore. I did for a while, right? But I know now that art and science together are important. I got things going, I got them in the community, the rest of my students did well, he made up all these credits, it was great. It was insufficient. What I neglected to pay attention to was the science. If I had created data, if I had graphed what was happening and been aware of the principles of behavior that I needed to be aware of and how they operate on behavior in a very scientific way, a very predictable and reliable way, replicable, then I would have been able probably to prevent him from dropping out. As I am implementing intervention, I also need to be programming for generalization. Otherwise, it is very likely that it's not going to happen. And I would hope that you will learn from my mistakes and not have tragedies like Jack dropping out or doing other things, and incorporate that science into the art of teaching. Thanks.